Have you ever experienced insomnia? Sleeplessness. For me, since this whole quarantine thing has been going on, I have very unfortunately developed a tendency toward insomnia. Man, it's awful. Here's what it looks like for me. So, end of a long day. I am tired. I'm ready to go to bed. I've gone through my nightly routine. Everything's quiet in the house. I get in bed. It feels so good. I lay there on my back at first. I start to fall asleep. And then all of a sudden, my mind is wide awake for no apparent reason. Sometimes it might be a worry about something that's going to happen in the future. A worry about, what's coming tomorrow. Will I have enough money? What's going to happen with this thing at work? What's going to happen with the kids? Sometimes my mind starts replaying things from the past. Have you ever had insomnia where your mind is on a playback of embarrassing moments from your life? Yeah, that happens to me. Sometimes it's things that people have done to me in the past, and then I realize I need to go and make those things right, or at least forgive them. Sometimes my mind just won't shut down. And as I'm laying there and my mind is not letting me go to sleep, I get frustrated. Man, I gotta go to sleep. If I don't fall asleep right now, I'm gonna be so tired tomorrow, this is gonna wreck my day. And half asleep, half awake, in the darkness, by myself, it starts to feel pretty hopeless. I start to get agitated. Frustration turns into anger. And then I get hot. Do you ever get hot when you can't sleep? And my covers, I have to start kicking off my covers. Sometimes I try to change rooms. And then the question comes up, do I look at the clock or not? My rule is no way, never look at that clock. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I do not want to know. I still got to get up at the same time. Insomnia, it is terrible. It's a spot where you feel like there is no peace. How could this possibly turn out? Why is God letting this happen to me? It's such a frustrating experience, even though in some ways it's such a small thing. Well, right now at Community of Hope Church, we are in a series of messages called Plan for Peace. And we are looking at how we can have peace. What actually is peace? How do we get it? And last week we started off looking at how this is actually God's plan for peace. Well, this week we're going to take a look at what is God's plan for peace when I can't sleep? What is his plan for peace when I can't sleep? And here's what we want to say right off the bat. And here's the main point for today. Like many things in life, when I'm in a situation where I can't sleep, God's plan, what he's trying to get me to do, is God is inviting me to come close. His plan for peace in that situation is actually for me to draw closer to him. We're going to look at a few different scriptures, one story from the Bible today, and we're going to be talking about how we can make the most out of a time that's really frustrating, a time when I can't fall asleep. Here's some statistics for us this morning about insomnia, sleeplessness. Number one, it is very, very common. In fact, we see here 30% of the adult population suffers from some level of insomnia. 30%, that's huge. Not only that, but insomnia is on the rise. Check this out. If you look here on the left, you'll see that in 1942, the average adult slept almost 8 hours a night. And by 2013, it was down to 6.8 hours. Now, of course, that's not the problem for every single one of us. Some of us have problems of sleeping too much and never feeling like we're well rested. That's also a sleep problem that comes from many of the same sources. Now, the message today is not about how to beat insomnia. It's not about how to cure it. Sometimes insomnia comes from just our worries and we're spending too much time thinking the wrong way. Sometimes we don't know where it comes from. Sometimes it is a real physical problem. And so in those cases, you need to go to a doctor and find all the different kinds of solutions that you can. But today's message and what the Bible has to say about insomnia is not directed toward curing it. It's directed toward how do we deal with it? How do we view it What do we do with it? How can we, in a moment where we're experiencing insomnia, still walk in God's plan for peace? Now let's spend a little bit of time thinking about what exactly is peace. And in this situation, we're thinking about peace in that moment when I have insomnia, which is a very frustrating moment. That moment when I can't sleep, or it could even be other things when I've slept, but I'm just still tired. I can't seem to get enough sleep and I'm sleeping too much. Or other frustrating situations in your life. So when I can't sleep, what is peace in that situation? What would the Bible say? And here we actually have some great places to go. I'm going to take you to one of my favorite places in the Bible that talks about sleep. And this is in Psalm 4. I'm going to read one section of it for you, and you'll see that it ends with a vision of peace, a picture of peace that involves sleeping. All right, so here we go. This is Psalm 4. Psalm 4, starting at verse 4 and through verse 8. Be angry and do not sin. So it's okay to be angry. It's not a sin to be angry in itself, but in your anger, do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. So here, the person that's being envisioned, the person's being encouraged to, when you can't sleep, you see that's what's going on here. The person's in bed and they're angry. Even in the Bible, people couldn't sleep. They had insomnia. But think carefully in your own hearts what the best thing to do in that situation is. Do not sin. Don't give in to your anger. Be silent. And Selah is a word that in the Psalms means stop and think about it. Take a breath and consider what's just been said. Offer right sacrifices. Those are going to be sacrifices, not actual external sacrifices, but sacrifices meaning the right kind of heart toward God. And put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, who will show us some good? Who will show us prosperity? Another translation says. Lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. You have put more joy in my heart than when their grain and their new wine abound. In peace, I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. The Lord alone is the one who makes me safe. I don't have to depend on my own strength or on other people, on what they're going to do to make sure that I'm safe and I have what I need. God himself, who made the whole universe, loves me, and I can trust him to keep me safe, even when I'm not sure how that's going to happen. And the picture that's being painted here of someone who can sleep in perfect peace because they know that all their needs are really being taken care of by someone who loves them. This is very similar to our expression, sleeping like a baby. Now, what exactly is it about a baby sleeping that is so attractive? When we say someone is sleeping like a baby, we're conjuring up this image of a baby or a young child who is able to sleep like they don't have a care in the world. When a baby knows that its parents are near and that they've taken care of its basic needs, it hasn't yet learned about the whole world out there or about things that its parents aren't able to control. And so its entire world is safe and secure. Now, when I was a kid, when I was a little baby, like all of us, I slept like a baby in perfect peace because my parents were there. When I was a toddler, I slept in perfect peace. When I got to be about 4, I no longer slept in perfect peace. I guess what happens as we grow up is that we realize that our parents are actually not in control of everything. There are things they can't stop from hurting us if those things came. And so I began to have worries, anxieties. And what happened to me is I actually had a recurring nightmare. Here's how my nightmare went. It always started out really great. Everything was wonderful. It started out with children running through a field full of flowers. What could be better than that? But very soon, as if you were watching a movie, from the right-hand side of the screen enters an eagle. Okay, an eagle, that's nice, but for some reason darkness came with the eagle, a sense of fear and dread. And then, as the dream progressed, I noticed that the eagle is riding on a nuclear bomb. The eagle and the nuclear bomb get closer and closer to me, and then the entire dream goes black. And I wake up in a sweat, screaming. Man, those were bad days. Eventually, that nightmare went away. But clearly what had happened, people talked about nuclear war a lot then, and I realized that my parents were not in control of nuclear war. No matter what they did, no matter the fact that they were with me, that didn't matter, because if nuclear war came, I and everyone else was in big trouble. And so I started to not be able to sleep because of something that was bigger than my parents. When a baby sleeps, we have an image of what it means to have peace with God. What it means to have peace from God, the kind of peace that Jesus is talking about, is that we are so much trusting in God that all those other things, it's like we're immune to them. They can't come in and get us or disturb us or shake us, because we know that our Father in heaven is with us. Now, many of us who have given our lives to Jesus and been following him for a while, we know that up here. We know that God is always with us. He's going to take care of us, but we don't always feel it in here. And that's the key. So how do we get there? How do we get to the place where we are really trusting, confident in God, so confident that we're like a baby sleeping? Once it knows its parents are there, it knows that it's completely safe, and it's able simply to be who it is and sleep in that moment. How can we make not only our sleep like that, but our whole lives like that? How can we have peace? So in those situations, in sleeplessness and insomnia, what do I do? We see that God has a plan for peace, and his peace is available to us. He's made that clear. But how do I receive it? What do I need to do? Let's take a look at John chapter 14. And this includes our key verse for the series, John chapter 14, verse 27. But let's look at a few verses before that, and we'll get an idea of what Jesus is telling us to do in order to receive his peace. Okay, here we go. John chapter 14, starting at verse 23. Jesus replied, he said to his closest friends, "Anyone who loves me will obey my teaching." Okay, that's pretty straightforward. So if you love him, you're going to do what he says. You're going to follow his example, okay? Then my Father will love them. Well, his Father is God in heaven, okay? So his Father is going to love you, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Now, this is very important. So what's being said here, Jesus is telling us how we can receive peace from God. And we do have something to do. We have to actively receive it. We receive it by trusting him. And when we trust him, we have to do the things that he says. So whatever situation we're in, we trust that God has allowed that situation to come into our life. We look to the Bible, we look to what Jesus taught, and we also look to what he did, and we try to do the same things that he did in those kinds of situations. We try to follow him. And if we do that as an act of faith, God is going to come and show up in our lives. He's going to come and live with us. And what Jesus is saying here is that that is what's going to bring us peace. It's not actually the things that we do that accomplish peace or that make it happen. That's not how it works. We are not able to achieve peace on our own. We have to receive the peace that God has given us. And we receive it simply when he is present in our lives, and we can sense that. When we obey him, we follow his way, he shows up in our life, and then we feel safe because the God of the universe is right here with me. Jesus goes on to say this, our key verse for the series, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. So do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Peace is a gift from God. We receive it by walking in obedience. We say, Lord, I trust you. I want you to run my life, and so I'm going to do the things that you say, not try to run it on my own. Okay, so in this situation then, when we're talking about sleeplessness, insomnia, what does obeying God look like? What does the example of Jesus look like? And that's where we're going to go next. We're going to go to a place in the Bible, a time in Jesus' life where he himself experienced insomnia. Jesus himself couldn't sleep. Now, this is remarkable because this was a man who seemed to be able to sleep in almost any situation. Have you ever met somebody like that? Somebody who could just kind of lay down anywhere and fall asleep? Well, Jesus could do it even in the middle of a storm. There's one situation where he was in the middle of a storm on the open sea in a boat. The boat was about to sink and he fell fast asleep. He was just able to sleep right through that. But there was another time in his life when he was not able to sleep. And that was the night that he was arrested. He knew that he was going to be arrested that night, and then he was going to be put on trial, tortured, crucified, die on a cross for the sin of the whole world. Not only that, in that moment, he was going to take on that sin of the whole world. And so that meant something far harder than anything he had ever faced. In fact, harder than anything anyone would ever face. And with that looming in front of him, on that night, Jesus was unable to sleep. He took his closest friends and he went that night to the garden that's called Gethsemane. It was an olive grove where Jesus and his friends often went to pray and to spend time alone with God. And when they get to the garden, Jesus leaves his closest friends a little ways away from him, and he goes off and spends a whole bunch of time in prayer. We can see during that time that he's worried, he's frustrated, he's got all kinds of intense energy. In fact, it says that he's sweating during that time, and it even gets to the point where he's so intense that his sweat becomes drops of blood. So what can we learn from Jesus on this night where he had insomnia himself, where Jesus was worried, frustrated, and couldn't sleep? The first thing that we can learn is this: accept it. Jesus spent a bunch of that night making sure that he was in tune with God's will and he was accepting what God was bringing into his life. He said, God, this thing that's in front of me, this thing that I'm worried about, I don't know if I can handle it. I certainly don't want it. Please take it away. And his father said no. And then Jesus again and again said, okay, then I receive this. Even though it's not something I want, I accept it. Your will, not my will. Let that be what happens. Your will, not my will. That's the same thing we need to do when we can't sleep. We need to accept it like Jesus. When we fight against the fact that we can't sleep or that these memories are coming into our minds or we're worried about whatever's coming, when we fight against that, that only makes it worse. It only separates us more from the peace of God. God is in control of everything. If he wanted you to simply be able to go to sleep at that moment, he could do it. Now, he's not the one who's causing you to not fall asleep. He doesn't make things that are bad. He's not causing the worry, but he certainly has allowed that to come into your life at that moment. And if he's really good and he's really in control, then that means that he wants to do something good through it. And so the first step, the first thing we need to do is accept. Accept this moment. Accept the fact that I'm unable to sleep right now. Accept the fact that I'm worried about something in the future. And then ask, what is God asking me to do with that? The next thing that we see Jesus do on that night is he takes all of that energy from his sleeplessness, all of the energy from his insomnia, and he turns it back to God. So for me, in that moment when I have insomnia and I'm getting angry, kicking off my covers, I'm too hot, I've got all this energy, my heart's racing. The question is, What am I going to do with that energy? Am I going to use it just to get more and more angry? Am I going to use it to try to force myself to go to sleep, fix things myself? That never works. The solution here is Jesus' way. I'm going to take that energy from this bad thing that's been allowed to come into my life, and I'm going to use that energy to seek God. And so that's our last point for today. Use it. Use that energy to seek God. Because the truth here is that even though this insomnia has come into your life, it's a bad thing, really God is using it to invite me to come closer to Him. It's an invitation. All right, so what can we do with this then? What steps can I take this week to follow Jesus, to become more like Him, to test Him, to try out what He says and see if I don't receive His peace? What steps can I take to receive His peace? Well, if this week you find yourself experiencing insomnia, well, then you've got a lot of different things you can do. In fact, this whole message applies to exactly that. But even if you don't find yourself experiencing insomnia this week, I'm going to give you one particular thing you can do at home this week. Probably you've never done it before, because not many people do this these days. But this will be our at-home devotions challenge for this week. Here it is. Try out what Jesus did. Watch and pray. What exactly does that mean? Well, it means just what Jesus showed the disciples on that night in the Garden of Gethsemane. He wanted them to give up sleep, to stay awake in the middle of the night, and to seek Him in prayer. And this is actually a practice that many Christians, many followers of Jesus throughout history have tried and found very powerful, a powerful way to seek God. So it might be that you just can't sleep. And so God is inviting you in that moment when you are sleepless. He's inviting you to come and turn that energy of sleeplessness that you want to, that tempts you toward anger, take it and turn it toward Him. Turn it toward Him in prayer. So, and this is a place where I will admit I struggle. A lot of times when I have insomnia, I think to myself right there in my bed, I should get up right now and I should go pray. I should get up and go to another room, get on my knees and use this energy that God has allowed to come into my life. Instead of using it for anger and frustration, I should use it to seek Him in prayer with intensity. Now, a lot of times I don't do that because the next thought that comes into my head is this: oh, but man, it's so cold outside of these covers. It's so cold outside my bed. I can't be bothered to get up and actually go into another room. You know what? It'll probably work if I just pray right here. And of course, it never does. Then I'm just in and out of sleep and stuck in insomnia for a long time, getting more and more frustrated. Insomnia, sleeplessness, is a major problem in our world. It causes poor health. It causes people to be in terrible moods. It's a root of all kinds of evil. But more than that, our lack of trust. Our lack of trust in God results in a lack of peace. Our inability to receive the peace that He has for us. What would it be like in your life if you put this into practice? What would it be like if, in whatever the situation is, whether it's sleeplessness or whether it's some other thing, just bad thing that you don't like in your life, what would be the end result if you regularly took that thing that you don't like, and you took the energy from it that usually you put toward frustration and anger, and you turned it back towards seeking after God? What would it be like for you and your family if you did that? I know we've been having a lot of struggles around our houses. We're all locked down together. But if we all were taking those frustrations and instead of turning them on each other, we were using the energy from those things to seek after God, accepting His will in our lives. In fact, viewing those things that we don't like as an invitation to draw closer to Him, what would be the result? Peace in myself, peace in my family. What would it look like if our whole church did this? If our whole church was up in the middle of the night this week, using that time, at least some of it, and energy that's there when we can't sleep to seek after God? What would it look like if this spread to our whole society? It would look like a society that's able to sleep, to live like a sleeping baby, completely trusting that they're safe no matter what happens. You know what happens if a baby can't trust that its parents are there and that they've taken care of its needs? You end up with a cranky baby. And a lot of times that's what we see around us, isn't it? People walking through the world who are living their lives like cranky babies. If we would all take those moments and turn them back towards seeking God, the end result would be a society with way less cranky babies, a church with way less cranky babies, a family with way less cranky babies. We would be able to sleep in peace because we trust that God alone is the one who's keeping us safe. Let's go and do it this week. We'll pray and then we'll continue in worship. Father in heaven, thank you so much for providing everything that we need to have peace in this life. Even though the world is broken, we are messed up on the inside. You have done everything that is necessary, and you've left your gift of peace for us to receive. God, we pray today that you would help us to see how we can receive it. Help us to view the moments in our lives that we don't like, the moments when we can't sleep. Help us to view those in a different way. Help us to view them as an invitation from you to move closer. Help us to accept your will in those moments. And help us to use the energy that those moments bring to seek you. And as we do it, may that spirit to know you more and to trust you, may that spread in ourselves, in our families, in our church, and in our community. And may you bring about a world that's able to trust you and sleep in peace. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.